Recovery podcast is real life stories from everyday people in recovery. From mental health issues, trauma, substance misuse, and behavioural addictions. Please visit the website www.lifeinrecovery.co.uk for links to social media and a range of books written by your podcast host, Bren Coy.
I was being a daddy.
It's bloody brilliant. Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
Really? Fucking hell, I hated it.
Did you?
The early days, yeah, I really hated it. I didn't find it very easy. I did actually. I mean, I breastfed as well, which was really hard with twins as well. So that was quite difficult. But yeah, I'm really glad that they're older now and they can make their own breakfast and shit. It's brilliant.
How old are your kids now?
They're 10.
Oh wow. Well, I've got two stepdaughters. I've got a 10 and a 12-year-old.
Oh.
So I've been in their life for the last 4 years, and then obviously I've got an 8-month-old now as well. So yeah, it's I love it. I love being a dad, and I love. Well, I think the thing is, I'm at the stage in my life where I've come to the place where I'm ready for it. Do you know what I mean?
Totally, babe.
Like, if it had been 10 years ago, I wouldn't have been ready for it. There's absolutely no chance.
I wasn't ready. I think that was the problem. I think if I was the age I am now, I may have embraced it slightly differently. Yeah. So, I felt like I was probably kind of pushed into it a bit too early for me. I wasn't ready to calm down at that age.
Didn't you have kids at the like height of when you were like really smack bang at the height of your career?
Yeah, it was kind of I think so. What year would it have been now? 2010 I had the girls. Yeah. So it was kind of tapering off a little bit. Yeah. But yeah, I think things are supposed to happen when they're supposed to happen. So when I went back into DJing again eventually, it kind of like made sense because I'd already made my name, so it didn't really matter for having a bit of time off, you know. But again, you can never plan these things. Well, you can, but you never know how you're going to react to them until you're in them.
Yes.
So
well, I mean, you're similarly to me, I suppose. You're that time of your life then. I mean, how my life was then and how my life is now is completely different. I'm not married. I'm not married to the same person for a start.
Yeah.
And I know you're not as well, you know.
I'm not with the same person. No, you know, me and Guy will never get married. We like each other too much. We're gonna have a blessing. You know, we had a Cambo ceremony together, which he fucking hated. But we'll definitely do ayahuasca together and be in a much deeper level connected in that way, I believe. I think that's because the whole marriage thing, like I remember how I felt when I was married. I just stopped making an effort completely. I was like, oh, I'll be fine now, I can just do what I want. I think I just needed to have a authoritative figure to look after me somewhat, and I think that's what my ex-husband definitely well I know was, because I went through a lot of what's it called, abandonment issues were very prevalent in that relationship, and I definitely subconsciously saw him as my father figure. So that was definitely who Lee was for me, because he was so sensible and I was so not sensible. You know, he's a fucking brilliant dad. He's a brilliant dad, but he wasn't right for me. But I made the right decision in having children with him, definitely.
Yeah. It's funny that actually, because I didn't know you both personally, but I knew enough of you to think when I was invited to your party, and I DJ'd at your party after your wedding.
Oh yeah.
Was it the pre? I don't know if it was the pre-party or the after-party. I can't remember, but I came and DJ'd at this party, and I did think to myself, I actually can't see how you two are together. I did think like you just seem like chalk and cheese, but I thought, you know, maybe it's just opposites attract. I don't know, but
I think it can be.
Yeah, it makes a lot more sense, the person that you're with now. I can see that, you know, just through the kind of pictures and the videos that you do and stuff. I can see that, you know,
he's Yeah, he's absolutely brilliant. He says hello, by the way, as well.
Yeah, hi guy.
He's upstairs playing Xbox with his boyfriends at the moment. So
Oh, is it? got his boyfriends round.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's a perfect segue, really, talking about like your marriage and stuff to get into your story, really, because I want to hear, you know, like what it was like for you growing up and how you got into the DJ scene and, you know, what that was like, and then what happened after you had your kids and up to where you are today, if that's all right.
Okie dokie. Right. Well, I was brought up in a place called Bromsgrove in Worcestershire, and it's a small little village. And I wasn't born there. I think I was born in Bristol, and my mum and my dad bought a pub together in Bromsgrove. So I lived in a pub from 4 years old. So I was always around older people. I was always around people who were alcoholics as well. Excuse me, I just had to burp then.
Better out than in.
I know. Oh, I'm trying to be polite on here. Usually on my live streams, I belch, and I'm not going to do it on here because I don't want to scare your listeners.
Oh, don't worry about it. We're all friends here.
So I lived in this pub for 14 years, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. There was always kids around. Sometimes there was fights. I think I learned from a young age that adults were kind of stupid. That adults, or some adults were, that people who were older didn't really necessarily know what they were doing. It didn't stop me from eventually starting to drink and stuff when I got a little bit older. However, it was mostly fun. It was mostly fun. We had some silly, like, kind of animals. We had like a massive garden. We had like sheep. We had Vietnamese pot-bellied pigs. We had parakeets. We had ducks, we had goats, and a lot of these. It really was, and it was kind of a big. It was a country upbringing as well, and a lot of these animals used to be brought to the pub by later on. After living at the pub for a while, by my mum's boyfriend, because he was a bit of a drinker, my stepdad, as presents to say sorry. So he always used to end up with all of these animals. So yeah, I mean, I'm skipping ahead a little bit there. My mum and my dad did split up when I was about must have been maybe I was 2 when we got to the pub, because they split up when I was 4. So they split up a couple of years after the pub was our home, and I was always a daddy's girl. Apparently, I didn't know that. And going back to what I was saying before about being a bit of a daddy's girl, that came out later on in life with my abandonment issues and how I was searching for someone subconsciously who was my dad, who could then save the 4-year-old version of me. And I learned that through a lot of inner child work. So going back to that kind of age, then my mum got with this guy called he was called Guy, weirdly enough, strangely enough, and my partner now is also called Guy. I recently found that that's not even his real name. His real name was Hugh, which is my dad's name.
Wow.
Like, work that one out. I know. I recently went back to where I'm from and saw a few of my mum's old friends, and they told me no, his name was actually Huey. And I was like, well, that's my dad's name. I was like, oh, whatever. So kind of a weird synchronicity thing going on there as well. And so when I was, I mean, okay, I was going to skip over that bit a little bit, but my mum was going out with this guy who's called Guy, for let's say 7 years, and he was an alcoholic, really, really bad. This is the first time I'd ever come across somebody who had fits from not having enough alcohol, from waking up in the morning and having fits. Now I had to go and call an ambulance, and it's the first time I'd experienced someone who just could not get out of bed. He had a gallon of Thatcher's cider by the side of the bed. Really, really heavy drinker. as were most of the people in that pub, and my mum having to deal with that. He was also extremely violent as well, not only to my mum, but to me, to my brother, until my brother got a little bit older as well, which was really hard to deal with as a kid, because when you're a kid, you can't do anything about it. You know, you have to just deal with the screams, you have to deal with the trauma, or you have to deal with hiding, and you recognize the patterns quite early on as well as a kid. You know when it's safe to step out, you know when it's safe to approach an alcoholic, you know when it's time to run away, and I knew the patterns really well. I wrote about this at length at points of my life to help externalize and process it all. And I remember I had a realization once, because my bedroom was right underneath the jukebox, so I could always hear what song was on through the kind of bass frequencies from the jukebox. You couldn't really hear the whole of the tune, but I knew which one it would be by the bass changes in the track, in the records on the jukebox. But I could also tell when someone was arguing. I could hear when a low bassy male voice was, and then I could hear the female voice, and I could hear when an argument was going from a normal conversation into a full blown argument, and then there'd be the crashes and things, and then the dogs barking, and you know, and it's those kind of things that kind of echo in your head as an adult as well. They used to, they don't anymore, thankfully, but I can always draw upon them for helping and speaking about them to other people. And definitely as a parent now, that I thankfully have broken the chain with that. I would never allow my children to be subject to those awkward feelings, at those traumatic dark spots in their childhood, because I definitely feel that it could hold them back. I don't see any helpfulness in that, really, apart from, I guess, bringing it to the light and to not do it. But you know what I mean, it's sometimes, I guess, it's better to not put that, if you're conscious enough to step away from that kind of a life, and not to carry it on, I think is the best thing. It was definitely for me. And then sadly, tragically, when I was 17, my mum died. She had cancer, and she was obviously taking on a hell of a lot with the pub. And me and my brother at this time were 17 and 15. So she had throat cancer. So for a while, she was okay for a bit. She eventually told me what was happening, because I could tell she'd went out one night, and she'd gone to see her doctor for some results. And then she came back and she told her friends, and she told me to get upstairs. I wasn't ready to tell the kids, obviously. And then she told me, and she had two options. She could either she could either wait until it killed her, or get it seen to. And she wanted to get it seen to, and it was throat cancer. So she had a tracheotomy, and the tracheotomy had to take out, I think it's like an inch or something, around the rest of the bundle of nerves and bits and pieces that were in that area. So she had to have her rib cage smashed so that her stomach could be brought up further towards her, further up, so it could all be connected again. She went through a lot, and there was a massive scar running down her chest all the way down to her tummy. You know, so that was really abrasive surgery that she had to go through. She also lost her ability to talk. She also had no sense of smell or taste. Like, as a kid, I didn't really take all of this into consideration, because it's just your mum, and you think, oh, mum's just ill for a bit. But mums don't die, do they? You know, mums don't die until you're like really, really old. So that never even entered my head. But it was a really, really hard time, and I'm so thankful that it wasn't a very long time. It was only probably like the most part of a year from when she'd started to have the treatments, and she also had radiotherapy as well, to her actually her body just had enough. But there were a lot of really funny moments in that as well, where I kept a lot of the notepads because she couldn't obviously talk, so she used to write things down all the time. And I found them many years ago, and I was then okay to start looking through them. It took me 13 years after she died to even have a photo of her around. I really didn't deal with it very well at all. So in this notepad, I found a particular day when she told me, she was saying something about my boyfriend at the time, and she was like, "Oh, it's okay," like mouthing it, you'll get over it, you'll be friends, and you just be friends, you're obviously not compatible or whatever. And then she started saying something else, and she was going, she's like mouthing the words, and I was like, "You what?" And she did it again, and I was like, I didn't catch that. And she rolled her eyes at me. She went, oh, and then she went and got her a notepad, and she'd written out, "I was just trying to say you're the only person I speak to who I don't have to write things down, and now I've just had to write it down." So I've got that written down, which is really cool. It's really sweet, because I was the only one that she could just talk to, and I'd know what she was saying.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be like overthinking it, or it was. So yeah, that was one of the very sweet moments that I do hold on to from that time. And yeah, and then the night before she went, I mean, this was a very big part of everything that I believe now on a spiritual level, is what happened the night before she died. And the night before she died, she'd had a heart attack, and she'd been under for a while. And they brought her back round again, and she was kind of stable. And then she turned around to me. I mean, bearing in mind, my mum was not one to talk about angels or anything like this before. And she said, "Amber, the angels came down to me last night, and they told me that I have to go with them." And she was like an excited child. I remember when she said it to me, she looked almost translucent. She looked glowing for someone that was in intensive care in hospital. She looked very excited. She looked so childlike. And I just remember her saying, I mean, I'd been dragged out of work. I was a veterinary receptionist, my first and only job before being a DJ. And I was like more like pissed off that this was in my lunch break, because you're quite dismissive of the fact that your mum's in hospital when you're 17 years old. You're like, whatever, this is just more of a problem for me than it is anyone else. So she told me about, she said, oh, Amber, darling, that the angels came down to me last night, and they said that I had to go with them because I'm needed elsewhere. I was like, right, okay, whatever, like drugs must be good in here or something, fucking hell. But then rest assured, like the next day, or very, very later on that night, she had a second heart attack, and it took them more than 5 minutes to bring her back round again. And I was the next of kin. And before this happened, actually, like literally a month before, my Uncle James, who she was very, very, very close with, he passed away in our pub he was visiting very, very unexpectedly. He had very severe asthma. And he couldn't reach his inhaler, and it was on January the 2nd that we found him. It was over New Year's Eve, and he died in the pub in the room opposite my bedroom. I wasn't there though, I was at a boyfriend's house at the time, and they didn't find him for about a day. But yeah, my mum was absolutely distraught, and I believe that because they were adopted, my mum and my uncle were both adopted into a lovely upper middle class family from Highgate, my gran and grandpa, who couldn't have kids themselves, and they were going to have a life of poverty probably, especially my mum would have done, and they were adopted at my mum was 4 weeks old when she was adopted, so her and my Uncle James had a really, really close relationship. So he was gone as well, and I believe that she just had to go with him. I believe that on a soul level they were here to find each other, and their work was done, And my mum told me so, you know, you'd be fine, dinner's in the oven, I'll see you in the next life, kind of a thing. And yeah, she was right, because then the next day, she, like I said, she had this other heart attack, and me being next to kin, I had to make the decision to turn the machine off after everyone had been and said their goodbyes. And yeah, then that was that. Then the next thing that happened was the pub had to be sold. I wasn't old enough to look after it. Well, before that happened, my mum's so-called best friend, unfortunately, the money side of things got the better of her, and she took over. She even took my mum's car. She took over my mum's bedroom. She was siphoning off the money from the business. Really, really, really horrible person. I have since seen her a few times, and I will acknowledge her. But it was very difficult for a very long time. And yeah, but the thing is with grief, it makes people do very weird things. But I am healed from that now. So then the pub was sold. And then for a little while I was homeless. I was sofa surfing on friends from Stoke-on-Trent's sofas and in their houses, sometimes even in derelict buildings in the town centre. But then that's where I found people who were into this strange music called hard house. So, so from that experience, I know, yeah. So from there, that's where I got into hard house, through all of these wonderful misfits that I found. Obviously there was a great deal of drug use going on with these people, and a lot of them are just amazing people, really are. We were all misfits. We'd all sort of lost our way in life a bit, and there were ups and downs to that time, but God, I'd never change one part of that. It was so important for my growth as well. And the weird thing is, throughout the whole of it, I had no fear at all. Like I'd probably, even though I didn't feel like I was suffering, because when you're a kid, like it was all an adventure. And because my mum went in the way that she went, I didn't feel like she was, if she'd have died in front of me screaming and clutching on to life and scared, it would have been so different. But she was excited to go. She was accepting of it. She'd gone through that separation from the ego, whether or not she understood that's what it was, or if it was, she'd accepted everything, and she was back to complete consciousness again. And in that moment, that's why I think after that moment I didn't feel any loss. And that was difficult actually with grieving, because eventually I started to feel like, maybe I should be sad, like maybe I'm supposed to be distraught that my mum's dead, you know. And eventually it caught up with me a bit, especially when I eventually had my own children. But I think a lot of that was probably because people were telling me how I was supposed to grieve, and people were, do you know what I mean? I think people
you've got like just listening to you speak, and I've listened to you speak at loads of different types of forums. You've got a massively high level of emotional intelligence, and you seem to have had that from a very young age, because to be able to go through that experience that you went through, and to have that, almost like the way I'm interpreting it is you kind of like knew that this was what was supposed to be happening, you know. And I don't know whether you had that realization later, or I mean, because that what you said about her and her brother, I mean, that was beautiful. I mean, they were twin flames, weren't they? That found each other again in this life. And it's whether, well, I get that, because Adele's my twin flame, you know, the woman I'm engaged to now. And when I read about that, it just totally, you know, completely put everything in my life into perspective, and it made me understand why every other woman that's been in my life wasn't that person. But it doesn't have to be your partner. It could be your brother, it could be your mother, it could be your daughter, it could be your sister. The one person that, like you said, their mission in life was complete, and then they left. And you to know that at such a young age, I mean, A, it's like amazing that you knew that, but B, it left you open to party.
Yeah.
and you know, and obviously, like, being part of that scene, like, I can relate hugely to. I mean, I suppose the reason why I've always wanted to have this type of conversation with you is because during the time when you were on that scene and I was on that scene, you know, we'd kind of we'd pass each other, say hello, whatever, but we never actually spoke properly, like deeply. But I just knew, I kind of like intuitively had this sense that we had some sort of a connection.
Oh,
and
that's amazing.
when the ayahuasca thing happened, which we'll get onto in a little bit,
Yeah.
that was like the penny dropping moment for me. I was like, oh right, okay, I get it now. This is this is the reason why we were kind of like, you know, met and stuff. But yeah, like involved in that scene. I mean, it was just an amazing time of life, wasn't it? It was like you said, no fear. Like the only time I ever got that again was when I got recovery.
Yeah.
But prior to that, it was like, you know, taking loads of E's and dancing all night long and DJing and being part of that scene was just, you know, it was like a synthesized spiritual experience for me every time.
Well, they do use MDMA now in helping people with PTSD and for people to come out of their shell and to chat. So there is a lot of there's a lot of wisdom in that. I think there's different kinds of recreational drugs and there's different ways that you can take them. But definitely pills are so helpful in those ways. But of course, because we don't know that and we're taking them recreationally, we always would abuse it. You know, you'd end up quadruple dropping, but there's absolutely no serotonin left in your body or dopamine left in your body that you're not able to do anything with it anyway. You know, we've all had that one.
Yeah. 3-day come down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the last time I ever took pills was well, I think it was about 11, 12 years ago, and it was on a New Year's Eve, and I think I ended up doing like 10 on New Year's Eve and 10 on New Year's Day.
Wow.
I was literally like, there was no, it was like they were rattling around inside me, you know, there was no, like you said, the dopamine, the serotonin had completely run out of my brain, and it just didn't work anymore. I could have carried on eating them like Smarties and it wouldn't have done a thing, and the come down after that was absolutely horrendous. And
this is the point, I think, is finding your edges.
Yes.
Finding your edges, finding where it's dropped off at, because it has to have a plateau. It's got to have like a roof to that, because I think again it's important because we found it through other ways, didn't we? We found it through ayahuasca, through other psychedelics. Psilocybin is also a majorly important one in my life today. But you know, it's how you use it. It's not it's why, it's how and why you use it, and that's not the only way either. If you're doing it for a disassociation from pain, it's always going to come and bite you on the bum eventually.
Yeah, and if you're doing it in the wrong setting, generally,
oh God, yeah.
I mean, any drug out there people can take recreationally, but I know that you're on the same wavelength as me. When like anytime I've done psilocybin or ayahuasca, it's always been in the right setting, and it's always been with intention, and it's always like looking to have stuff come up that I can then deal with afterwards. The integration afterwards has always been very, very important. But yeah, like this is the reason why like I talk about it a lot in recovery, is because it's quite a taboo subject. Like,
oh really?
Well, I mean, if you imagine, especially in fellowships like Narcotics Anonymous,
yes,
it's total abstinence from all mind and mood altering substances. So therefore,
it's abstinence-based recovery, isn't it?
Yeah. So therefore, all psychedelics still fall under the drugs label, but I just see it in a different way. I see these as medicines, you know, tools for helping with recovery, should you choose to walk down that path. But so when you were DJing and you were kind of enjoying yourself and living that lifestyle, you weren't fully aware at that time then that you kind of had this pain and this trauma that you were potentially avoiding.
Not in the slightest, babes. Not in the slightest. I think as well that's probably why I got so good at DJing so quickly. Like I literally, like I said, I went to Stoke-on-Trent and I found these wonderful people who are into this music called Hard House, and someone had some decks there, and I literally jumped on some decks one day, and I'm not joking, like 2 to 4 weeks after that, I was away. And I had my first residency at Golden in Stoke-on-Trent, where I was warming up for people like Tiesto, like K-Class, who else would have been there at the time? Paul van Dyk, Armin van Buuren, all of the big trance names were there. Judge Jules, that's where I saw the Tidy Boys, or they saw me for the first time. And as soon as they saw me, they signed me. I was actually Lee, my to-be husband years and years later, who was there. And the reason why he knew I would be perfect for Tidy was my last track before I handed over to him and Ammo, who were doing a Tidy Boy set together. I think Andy was unwell or something. It was Travel Bulgarian, but it's a very small 33 RPM disc. And apparently it's quite difficult to mix in. I've never had any problems with it, but it really impressed Lee. And he told me years later, yeah, that was a big reason why we booked you, because you were mixing like really well. And the reason why I got so good so quickly was really thanks to taking a lot of, which I thought was speed at the time, but it wasn't. It was crystal meth. We were all on crystal meth, but all it did was make me go into my little zone on the decks. I would be there for days mixing one tune into the other. And when I was doing that, it was a complete meditation for me, that like life and everything stood still. It was in complete flow state all of the time. Completely, like there was no yesterday, there was no pain, there was no worry about tomorrow, there was just this moment. It was the literal power of now. That's what it was. And that's even to this day, that's what I have when I mix. Thankfully, I don't have to take copious amounts of drugs anymore to enjoy that experience. But it really, really fast tracked me with my muscle memory. And I can't discount it for that. I wouldn't obviously recommend that people, if you want to learn something quickly like DJ, and that you take a lot of speed and or whatever, because it's not healthy. It's not, for a lot of people, it would probably take you down a wrong route that you wouldn't want to do. For me and my life situations, this is just how it panned out for me, particularly just me personally. But yeah, it I do have to say that, because it's me being responsible with what I say, because I know some people will listen to what I say and take it quite literally, but it's important that people know that there's a big downside to doing that as well. But yeah, there was just this moment, and I think when you have someone who's lost everything, I've said this before, that there's nothing else to lose. You won't want to come into confrontating that person, because they will win, you know. There's nothing left to be. There was no worry that I might fuck up. I didn't care, you know. I had nothing to lose. There was nothing else, you know. It was just, let's do this then. And because I enjoyed it, I think the process of it helped a lot with the trauma, because, and I know now later on in life, I've looked into this, that when kids in particular have gone through a traumatic experience, like at the time of going through it, if they give them a game of, say, Tetris, and let them play with the blocks and sort the blocks out in order, that actually will help with the trauma on a psychological level. And I guess in a lot of ways, me slotting 2 tunes in tempo based and matching them up, and it was kind of in my head, it kind of gives me like a 3D map of what I'm doing. I can imagine things being in a 3D map of things slotting in place like a big jigsaw, musically and rhythm wise. And I'd do that. I even once on a big bender went through all of my BXR back catalogue of vinyl. BXR is like a techno label. And I nearly started writing an email to Mario Picotto, because I was convinced that I found a way that you can mix them all in a certain order, because they all had slight little 1-bar breaks in them. but there was a way that you could mix them one into the other without having to stop it and then start, and they would all match up perfectly. I was absolutely convinced.
You've gone down the BXR rabbit hole.
Yes.
Well, I relate to everything that you just said there, because when I used to mix, I would see it in colours. So
that's like synthesasia, isn't it? Whatever it's called. Yeah,
I'd listen to a track and I'd think, right, that's a purple, that's a green, that's a yellow, that's a red. And that's how I would make my sets. And I would, you know, back in the day though, wasn't it beautiful, because you had the vinyl, didn't you? I mean, when we moved to CDs, before that, I used to know, like, photographically, the A side, the B side, where all the mixing points were, and then when it went to CD, it completely changed. But before that, it was all colours, and that similar experience to you, really. Like, when I got my first set of decks when I was 18, and by 20, I had a residency at Housewife's Choice and another residency at Parlez-Vous, and I think what you've got is what I've got, which is the total and utter mental obsession around it.
Definitely.
It's like, if I'm gonna do something, I do it 100%, and I like it. It has to be perfect, basically.
Meticulous.
Yeah,
totally. Yeah. I remember going through, listening back to my my recordings, and when I used to, my very first recording that I ever did was on what's it called now, mini disc.
Yeah.
And I worked out, and I tell my students how to do this now as well. I worked out how you can make a perfect mix first time, every time. And what I used to do was I used to get my set in order, so like an hour's set, so around about 11 or 12 records, and I would have little notes on them from the one that I was playing to the next one, and it would say something like, it would say 32 LBD, and I knew what that meant. I knew no one else would know what that meant. 32 LBD would mean 32 bars after the last breakdown, and that would be where I'd be mixing it in. And then there'd be other little signs as well. There'd be like a little circle with a notch on it in case I needed to know where my bass gains would be, EQ would be, exclamation mark, or with a G if the gain needed to be put up a bit if it was a quieter vinyl, all of these little things. And I would record on my mini disc player every single mix 3 times and then move on to the next one. And the reason why I did that was because I would choose the best mix out of the 3, and then I would put the mini disc recording onto Wavelab. No one told me how to do this. I just had a thought. I wonder if I could do this. And then I put it all into something called Wavelab. And from there, I cut out from the breakdown of each one which one was the best one, and then spliced them all together and took the best one out of each of them. And then that was my very first recorded mix, and it was perfect, absolutely perfect in every way. And then that was the one that got sent to Tidy.
Yeah.
So, and I tell my students about that one now. It's one of the, you can have that one for free.
Well, it sounds like, you know, when you're saying that, it sounds very similar to when I've heard Joe Rogan talk about him doing his stand-up, you know, when he does take after take after take to get it perfect. Because if you're going to be good at anything, if you're going to be successful, you have to do these things. Like, you have to be obsessive, you have to be driven, you have to be passionate. I mean, unfortunately, that can send some people down a road of destruction, but like, obviously in your case, you've managed to like keep control of it and use it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I've never had my only issue was with my breakdown that I eventually had after having kids. It wasn't even drug induced or anything. It was purely out of delayed grief from losing my mum. So I guess in a way, the way that drugs played a part for me was it kept me happier for longer, and it did eventually start to stop me from feeling my feelings, and that's quite dangerous. It's really important to feel your emotions. It's okay to feel your emotions, but like anything, it can get addictive. And I definitely noted that like when you're successful, I was traveling the world, I was on front covers of Mixed Mag and M8 magazine, and playing at all the top festivals, and you don't really need to look at yourself deeply when the world's telling you who you are. You know, it definitely stalled that part of my learning. I actually think I'm quite a late bloomer with it all, because I was quite, I didn't go to university and learn to be self-sufficient or anything, and I come from a very lovely upper middle class family, so apart from the part where I was homeless for a bit until all the red tape had got sorted out, there's so much stuff that needed to be sorted out legally before I was able to get hold of any of the money from that. But in that time it did teach me a lot, but until I'd had kids and my marriage dissolved, I'd never fully been completely responsible for myself. I'd always been able to just get away with, doing loads of drugs and drinking, and then it would all be okay because I had someone holding me up all of the way. I always had someone there behind me to come and pick me up, and as soon as I needed to be responsible for myself, that kind of like had to go. That part of me, especially with having children as well, that knocked it on the head. That behavior needed to change because I wouldn't be able to be a good parent, and that really worried me. That was probably my recognition of drugs, having that darker side. It just took a longer time for it to get there. And I guess as well with artists is bad behavior with DJs and stuff is kind of like interlinked with just their character. For me it was more, Amber's just having a crazy cat lady day, or artistic temperament. At first it was called artistic temperament, and then it became, Amber's going a bit crazy cat lady. But really I was suffering, I was in a lot of pain, but I didn't know that I was, because I was so used to playing this character of Amber D. I didn't know who Amber was at all. I just knew who Amber D was, and I could play her. I could always play this character Amber D. But I definitely did eventually, after having kids, I couldn't DJ anymore. I wasn't actually any good at it. I forgot how to do it. And I think that, again, subconsciously, it was probably a good job because I didn't have that to hide behind anymore. And because I didn't have that to hide behind, I had to go away and deal with my emotions and deal with things. And I'm so glad I did. I'm so glad I did it.
Yeah.
I don't know what I was frightened about. Like, I was expecting some dark, horrible monster to be, lurking inside of me. And I'd done all of these things, and I was such a bad person. And when I looked in there and I put the light inside me and I had a look around, it's just me. And I'm like, hello. Yeah. Yeah. There was no monster, but no. I'd been probably led to believe there was, and I'd probably made myself believe that there was. But yeah, it was really, a good realization.
It's really cathartic listening to you say that, because for two reasons. Because one, I really related to the bit where you were saying I could play Amber, because I could play Locks.
Yeah, you could, exactly.
And I was a bit of a knobhead, to be fair. Like, I just, when I look back now and I think back to that person that I was then, I think I wouldn't like him now. Like
I'm the same about me.
Yeah. I just wouldn't like that person. And
I would have been scared to be around someone like me. I remember I met someone who was like me. She was actually my agent for a little while as my old agent stepped out. And I had to say it to her. I had to say, look, you're too much like me. I said, I'll be your friend, but I'm not having you manage my career. I said, I just can't. I can't deal with you. You're too mental.
You're holding the mirror up. You're holding the mirror up to me. Well,
yes.
And the other thing that you said as well is that darkness inside, because funnily enough, the two times when I did ayahuasca and when I did psilocybin, both times the medicine presented me with, it asked me the question, do you want to go to the root of all the problems? And I was like, no. Okay. I was like, nah, I'm not ready for that. And actually, when I was listening to you, I had this real catharsis happening, because the truth of the matter is, the reason why I didn't want to go there is because I thought exactly the same thing as you. I thought that there was going to be this real darkness, this real evil part of me that would be unlocked, and I would have to go through that. And actually, that isn't true, is it?
It's not. it's really not. It nearly put me off going to do ayahuasca, actually, feeling that even though I'd felt like I had already done quite a bit of shadow work, I'm also not stupid enough to know. I know that there's always more, because the moment that you go, oh, I've done it all now, like, yeah, I know sorted. What I'm doing, then you know you get sorted now. Like Alan Partridge bouncing back.
Your ego's taking control again.
Yeah. So I knew not to think like that. So before I went and did ayahuasca, I thought, fucking hell, this is gonna be, what if I find something else? Like, what if this part of me that's a liar? What if I'm a liar? What if the things that I've lied about in the past come out and I get found out? And it went back to things about being a kid when I stole some Hubba Bubba 10 years old out of the shop, and like thinking, is this going to karmically fuck me over when I'm going to do ayahuasca? And it didn't. But it nearly stopped me from wanting to do it. And that was even after starting to do my shadow work and looking at those parts of me. My experience with it was beautiful. The first night wasn't. The first night was a lot of crying, a lot of connecting with my inner child. I have never cried that much in my life. My face was wet from tears just coming down my face. Yeah. It's the best. How does Terence McKenna say it? He says, like, ayahuasca is a lot. He says something like, a lot of people will tell you that ayahuasca is the best drug that they've ever taken in their lives, but they'll probably only take it 2 or 3 times in the whole lifetime. And it's so true. It's very powerful. And I'm looking forward. I feel like I'm ready to go back now and do it again. I did actually book in to do it with the same people that me and you went to. Yeah. But it got cancelled because of COVID, which I accept. Obviously wasn't the right time for anyone. Yeah. But when that portal opens up again, when that time is right, I have saved up some money so that I can definitely do that again next time.
Yeah, I feel that calling a little bit again as well, actually. It's just not quite the right time for me, having a newborn and stuff, but definitely, if the door opened again, then I'll certainly walk through it. Mm-hmm. We've got to tell the story, haven't we? Because
shall we tell the story?
That was just incredible. I mean, I went on this retreat, and I was finishing off a book called Anonymous God, and I did my first ayahuasca ceremony, and during the ayahuasca ceremony, Mother Ayahuasca spoke to me and basically took me through a series of lessons. But right near the end, she basically spoke to me about this book that I was writing, and she said, you need to end this book now and start a new book about your ayahuasca experience and call it Together. So I was like, okay. So I kind of took that on board, and then the following morning I was sat in the lounge just chilling out, and the guys that ran it, they asked me to hold the video camera and film them pulling out the names out of a hat for somebody to win a retreat there at that particular retreat. And basically, to cut a very long story short, as they were going through it, they were saying, like, can tell us give us a letter of the alphabet, and I chose A, so it was like everybody with the letter A in their first name was safe, and then choose a letter for the surname, and I chose D, and eventually it came to, they picked out this name, and it was Amber Dowler. And I was holding the camera, and I just literally nearly fell off my chair. And I turned the camera on myself, and I was like, I know this person.
I remember you doing that when I watched it back. Yeah.
Oh my God, it was unbelievable. Oh, and I just couldn't believe it. And it just made me realise that I was in the right place. It was like the biggest synchronicity that could ever have happened. And then I sent you a message, didn't I, saying, you won't believe this, I've just pulled your name out of a hat.
Yeah, We've not spoke for like 10 years, haven't we? All right. How are you?
I know. And I think the weirdest thing was, I think for some reason, some strange reason, I hadn't looked at your page or anything on Facebook for years and years, because I've been into the music for years.
Yeah.
And I just so happened to look at your page, and I'd watched you giving an interview about something, and then obviously that happened.
Yeah.
Had you already been? Did that one go to Guy, or was that the one that you went
No,
on?
what had happened was I'd recently won a court case with the HMRC.
Oh, that
took them to Crown Court, and I managed to get back my working tax credits that I was due, that they tried to tell me I wasn't an actual DJ, which I am, long story short. So the money that they had to pay me back was about $2,000. So some of that went into the studio, and then the other bit went into the ayahuasca retreat. So I just found them online, that company. So I'd bought my a week's retreat. It was their flagship week. It was I think they'd had like a new tribe in or something, like the Shipibo. Yeah. So I'd bought. Did you have them as well? Yeah, cool. They were like the best ones apparently.
Yeah, original. The OGs.
The OGs. So I'd bought it already. But what happened was I'd also put my name in for this competition as well, just on the off chance. In case I didn't win, I'd already booked it all in anyway. And then when I won, I gave that prize to Guy, because I think it was just for a weekend or something. So I gave that one to Guy, my partner, and he came on a separate one to me. I think a part of that, well, I know that part of a really big part of when I did ayahuasca was I had to come on my own and be strong, do it on my own, meet other people. I didn't need anyone around me who was going to remind me of my straw man, who I am in everyday life. And if Guy was with me, even though Guy's very, very spiritual and aware, self-aware as well, I feel it would pull me out of really letting go. So we both came on different occasions. I think next time though, I think we'll both want to be coming together on the next one.
Yeah.
So
what was the outcome of it then for you? Because I mean, just quickly tell us why you went in the first place, and what actually the outcome of having an ayahuasca ceremony was.
I don't know why I went. I was looking. I had heard about ayahuasca, and I'd done a bit of research on YouTube about it. Good and bad. Mostly good though, thankfully. Don't think I knew anyone who'd done it, or I might know some one or two people through the scene who have done it. But I felt like I needed some direction. I was still doing quite a lot of amphetamines at the time. I found like doing amphetamines definitely helped me to, as it always has done through my life, to speed learn things, excuse the pun. And I was getting to a point where I knew I wasn't addicted to it, but it definitely, I had to start to find some other way of dealing with life, because I'm also always been very self-aware over the last 10 years, definitely. And I knew that I didn't want something external to me in order to be able to function. And I felt like doing speed, probably 3 or 4 days out of the week, even though it was manageable, it didn't feel right. I didn't feel like this was my design for life. So going away and doing ayahuasca was kind of nicely forcing me into eating well, no drugs at all. I mean, I don't take any of the drugs anyway. Literally with speed, it was definitely just an energy thing. So I eventually started to put a lot of things in my way. So, for example, I do a lot of live streams now, which means I have to look presentable, which means I can't take speed anymore, because I don't want to look jerky and like I've been up for 5 days, and all those things. So I naturally put things in my way to stop my unconscious from thinking it might be a good idea. Oh, just have a little bit or whatever. And doing ayahuasca was a big part of that as well. So, and when I went, from what I got out of it, I wasn't scared at all. What I saw reminded me a lot of experiences that I'd had through staying up for 7 days at a time. Like all of my preparation from drug abuse in the past kind of made it really easy for me to accept what was happening in the ayahuasca ceremony. I could even stand up, I could function, and even the facilitators were like, "Oh, you seem all right," you know, like, and I was there helping others and stuff. Like, it was nothing, and then I could go back into it again. I feel that next time I would probably want to try and be less in my head, because I recognised I was kind of narrating, having a kind of internal monologue of what was happening. Oh, no, this is happening. Now this is happening. And I was like, don't use words. Like, that's words. And I was getting kind of like stuck in these patterns. And I get that a bit with psilocybin as well, when I use psilocybin. So I had to practice feeling. And I have an image that I have of one of my daughters when she was really small. When they're really tiny and they do that thing with their hands where they curl up their hands. Like, oh, I have an image which is pure love for me, that image. So I meditate on that image, and then I had so many more visuals coming in. Mother Nature was telling me, look at me, dance. I'm dancing for you. Oh, this is the only time I'm getting choked up. Like that, it was as if Mother Nature was like a child asking you to just watch them dance, and it was so beautiful. It really was. It was one of the most pure moments that I've ever had in my life. Was like connection with everything. It felt like home. It felt it felt lovely, and it really helped me to work with my inner child stuff, you know, with the image of nature and the geometrics being like a child asking you to watch them dance. And that for me was just such a beautiful moment. It really was. And then the night after, I became friends with this girl, Becky, who I'm still friends with now, who is a trans male to female. And we got on so well. But then on the second night, I think, like, she's also a published psychologist, extremely intelligent lady. She really is. But we'd because the first night was kind of the hardest one for me, and I think a lot of us. On the second night, we were having such a giggle because we were sat next to each other. There was some chanting going on one of the songs, and it was like some kind of like Buddha prayer thing, and but to us it sounded like it was commentators for Channel 4 horse racing. So we were just pissing ourselves trying to be really quiet, which was making it even worse. If so, like, anyone that hasn't yet done ayahuasca, if they're a bit scared or a bit apprehensive, that's completely normal. But you will have so many wonderful release moments from delving in. Like, you can see just from that experience that I've just had here on this podcast, that from having an emotional release, there is also the other side of that, where you have the laughter with that every time. It won't just be crying for the sake of crying and then you just feel down. You kind of laugh, cry a lot. You have a lot of realizations, and the laugh cries are the best ones.
It's total you just use the word release. It's total release, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, in all forms of emotion. I mean, I did exactly the same thing. I cried my eyes out for hours.
Yeah.
And then I was just in bliss for hours, and then I was laughing, but like proper belly laughing.
You imagine if me and you were doing that on the street on a park bench, we'd look absolutely nuts, wouldn't we?
I used to for 20 years.
But
no, it's definitely like it's not something that you would just do on a whim.
No.
It's just so healing, and
Yeah.
it really, like, it's very, very powerful, isn't it? It's very powerful.
It is, and I can see now why when Terence McKenna said on an interview that I watched on YouTube about why it was someone's favorite, it can be people's favorite drug, but they'll only need to or want to do it a few times in their lifetime. Again, I think a lot of I know a lot of the facilitators now. I've stayed in contact with a lot of them, and even they have to have time out and step away from it, because that can be addictive as well. Staying in an ayahuasca community and doing it all the time, you have to learn how to bridge your connection with the outside world to the spiritual. That's kind of our job, because there's no point us knowing about all of this if we can't come back and share it with other people in a art kind of a way. I mean, this is what Alan Watts says it really well. You know, there's no point seeing God in an ashtray when you do acid and not being able to explain it to people through art, through being creative, through speaking your message quietly and clearly, through writing books.
Yeah.
You know, all of these ways that you can, in a story, you know, all these ways that you can translate and communicate what this is without it sounding like you're telling people, you know, your particular personal journey, because everything's personal to each and every one of us, isn't it? It's a very personal experience, but what it leaves you with is a great sense of community and a great sense of connection. And we do kind of sever our connection with spirit in Western civilization, and it's really important for us to be getting that back. I think more people are going to go for it now. I really do.
Well, you can't explain it to anybody. It has to be
not with words. You can't. No.
you can't, like, I mean, and on a grander scale, it's the same with God, isn't it? A higher power, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
There's no way that you couldn't tell me what God is. I would have to experience that for myself. And
yeah, it's
exactly
again, Alan Watts says it. I can't remember which Indian religion it is. They say neti neti. They say what God is not.
Yes.
So you can always say what God is not. You can't really say what he is.
Yeah.
And there's something really paradoxical and amazing in that we can't use the English language to explain these things. It has to be a personal experience. I think technology is getting a lot better, where I've seen a lot of visuals that remind me a lot of what it looks like on LSD or psilocybin or on ayahuasca. All of those are all slightly different, but you will be shown what you need to see. You really will. I had a little bit of snakes.
Yeah, I had that too.
Yeah, the snakes eating you up, that kind of thing is quite a usual one.
Yeah.
I think that's something to do with Anunnaki. Apparently it can be explained in that way. But everyone's different, and it's really interesting how we've all got these themes that run through us subconsciously. It probably goes back to who's the dream guy?
The dream guy.
Yeah, it talks about dreams and stuff. Jung.
Oh yeah, Carl Jung.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Carl Jung.
So there's certain themes that we all have, like the snakes and that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's strange how we all have the same images in our heads or very similar ones. You know, we all, a lot of us, like you just said there, you recognise the snake in your visions kind of a thing. Then you know where that comes from is quite
the archetypes. You mean?
Yeah, the archetypes. That's the badger.
Well, another thing that Alan Watts said is he said when you get the message, once you get the message, hang up the phone. In other words, don't keep going back and doing it once you've actually seen what you need to see and once you've got the message, because it's all about how you then take that message into your day-to-day life, as you said.
I like that.
You know, whether it's writing books or whether it's speaking to people in this type of forum, or even if it's just through music, even if it's just one-to-one with your friends, like, you know, it's just about being able. Well, you use the word connection, and that sums it up for me.
Yeah.
Is like I lived my life prior to recovery and psychedelics. I lived my life in a very, very selfish, disconnected way,
Yeah.
which was all about me basically, and me trying to achieve a level of, whether it was fame or material satisfaction or whatever the case was, just to fuel this ego that needed fueling. Whereas now I try to do the absolute opposite to that as often as I possibly can, you know, and connection is the way that that happens, whether it's with my kids or whether it's with my friends or my family or my fellows in recovery. I just try my best to think, right, okay, well, what can I do for them first, and then my stuff can come after. And as a result of that, I tend to have a pretty peaceful mind, you know, like.
That's good. That is really, really good, and I'm happy for you on that. As long as you do make sure that you keep some time for you, because you can't help anyone unless you're
Well, you know all the
functioning
stuff I do.
yourself.
You know,
Pardon?
you know all the stuff I do. I mean, like I've just finished my 5th book, so I'm writing
Yeah.
a lot, and I'll send you that actually because it's finished now.
Please, that'd be wonderful. Thank
After the
you.
conversation that we've had today, I think that you'll really enjoy reading it, and
I'd love that.
it's called All Is One: The Science and Spirituality of Consciousness.
Oh, brilliant. Now we've got another lockdown. I'll be doing a lot of readings. That'd be brilliant.
Cool. So just to finish off, what was your, you know, like the integration afterwards, after the ceremony, and up to where you are now? Because that ceremony was what, three years ago, wasn't it? Roughly about 3 years
Yeah,
ago.
it was. I'll have to have a little think now. I mean, it's fine if we go on a little bit. I'm fine till for about 15 minutes more, whatever. I'm enjoying the conversation.
Cool.
I'm definitely better. I'm definitely on a like I don't know whether or not ayahuasca okay, so ayahuasca attributed to me being at the place where I am now, without a doubt. I don't know quite how it's done it, but I feel it was it didn't need to be a wow moment for me. It was for some of them. There was a lad who I keep in contact with now who is an alcoholic, and he got a lot of wow moments. I don't think he'd ever had any spiritual experiences previous to that. So for him, it was quite dynamic and quite in your face. For me, it was enjoying the experience and dealing with my inner child stuff, like we said. I think that on a deeper level, it will have allowed me to be closer to my own children, my own daughters, which will in turn free me up from self-doubt and a lot of the negative self-talk that I used to have. I'm definitely more confident now as well, a lot more confident. I am a teacher now. I'm a mentor. I'm doing mental health training for a friend of ours, Billy Daniel Bunter, who's now he's another DJ, rave DJ, as you'll know, who set up a thing called Safe Space Movement. So I'm involved with that as a mental health counsellor. So I'm doing the proper training for it as well, and I naturally can speak to people about anything to do with mental health. I do on a Saturday. I do a mental health talk on my live streams on my personal profile on Facebook. And doing those things takes a level of integration. I couldn't have done this if I was still having ups and downs, because it wouldn't be consistent enough. So I definitely feel that ayahuasca had ironed out a few creases, let's say that. It definitely ironed out a few creases, and it did give me a lot of confidence, even in the going there, you know, even the bit before that.
Can I just say that is absolutely bloody awesome? I mean, well, it is. I mean, like from there, from 2017 to, you know, you're doing speed 3 or 4 times a week, and obviously a bit up and down. Then you've had this experience, and then like I always say with any of these psychedelics, the hard work comes after the experience.
Yeah, definitely.
You said it yourself. The experience shows you what you need to see, and then the hard work comes after. And the only person that puts in the hard work is you, and
Yeah.
you've now, like, you're now really giving back with what you're doing with the mental health talks. That's awesome. I've watched a few of them actually, and I
Oh, thank you.
yeah, I really enjoyed it. I put one of them up on my page actually. I really enjoyed it.
Oh,
And that's the type of thing that I think this is all about. Like,
absolutely,
you haven't gone into like formal recovery because you didn't need to, but you've still gone down this route of helping people. And that's what it is. Like, for me, it's about, like, globally as a civilization, the only way that we're going to get any further in this universe is by starting to help each other more.
I reckon that's a big part of it. I mean, you saying there that I've not gone into formal recovery. I did actually do the 12 steps in Seville. I did 3 weeks at a what they called rehabilitation place, but I wasn't really ready. It was more to do with me doing it because I was sorry for staying out, and I'd missed Lee's birthday, my ex-husband. I'd missed his birthday because he was too busy partying in Ibiza. I missed the flight, missed his whole birthday. I didn't care. I just didn't care at all. I was being selfish, like you said. And when I got back, I went for 3 weeks. I only had 3 weeks that I could fit in around work and stuff. And I remember one of the guys there, I had to do Alcoholics Anonymous as well, and stand up and say, hello, I'm Amber Dowler and I'm an alcoholic. I learned a lot in that. I learned about the 12 steps and I enjoyed learning about it. And one of the guys who run the place, I remember him saying to me, you'd make a really good counsellor, because I was helping this other patient there through missing home and stuff, and I was just sat there with her and talking her through it, and he stopped and he turned weirdly and he went, you know what, Amber, you'd make a really good counsellor. Like, thank you. Does that mean I can go?
Have I passed?
Yeah, can you just tick this form to say I'm okay to leave now? Cheers.
That's proper mad though, because I had absolutely no idea that you'd had that experience.
Yeah, I did go, and I'm still really good friends with some of the people there, and I loved the way that rehabilitation allows all of the people there to talk to one another. And I understand now why it should have been longer than 3 weeks. It should have been there at least 6 weeks, because a lot of your natural conversation, and this is why communication is so important and opening up to each other, because a lot of the things that I spoke about to them was a surprise to me, and one person can say one thing that will spark off a memory for you, and then you can go, oh, that reminds me of some time when this happened to me, and you realize you're not alone in this. You're never alone in this. You're always safe and you're always loved is a motto that I always say to people. But I have had the experience of doing it in a professional capacity. I actually believe that if I'd have had more of that, it probably would have shaved a bit more time off my recovery. I think I could have done it a lot quicker if it had been done sooner. However, it is very, very much integrated. It's not like 6 weeks and then, come on, you're back out in the real world now, deal with it. It's slowly integrated into me. It's imprinted in me now, and it feels safe to be able to deal with being around alcohol, being able to deal with people offering me stuff, and I can quite happily just say no, and know that I'm not missing out.
Yeah.
I know that I'm not missing out, because I don't feel the same about it anymore. I'm happy with my ayahuasca treat every so often and see what Mother Aya has got to say to me. I will always check in with her. I will always check in, throughout my whole life. And I even told my children where I was going, and that's a good sign that there was no shame in it. I said to them, Mummy's going to do some medicine, and this medicine's called ayahuasca, knowing full well they would have gone back to their father. And a big part of my worry as an early mum was worrying that recreational drug use would mean that I'm a terrible mother and I would not be allowed to be a mum. And it wasn't the case. It was unfortunately a lot of lies, a web of lies that were said to me by my ex-husband in order to make me more docile and agree to certain things with the divorce. And it did get very messy, but A lot of things were done then that I am okay with now, and we can see eye to eye. Well, I can look him in the eye. He's not very. He didn't know how to look me in the eye quite as easily, but that's his journey. But I was very okay with saying to my kids that I'm going to do ayahuasca. Even their nan, Lee's mum, she was fine with it. She didn't understand it, but she accepted that that's what I was going to do. So the kids will always be brought up in a way of understanding about these medicines and, you know, their place on earth. And I hope for them one day they may experience it if they so wish. But
I have no problem in the future with my my stepkids is a different situation because obviously they're not my children, but if my daughter turned around to me in 20 years time or whatever and said, I'm going to go and do ayahuasca, I'd say, can I come with you for a start?
Yeah. Don't talk to any boys.
I know, yeah. I'd have no problem with it whatsoever, but recreational drugs, I don't, like I wouldn't advise anybody to take cocaine or whatever. That isn't to say that I have any major issue with it. I just think that, ultimately, I mean, it's like anything, innit? If you're having a drink just to chill out and to relax, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're having a drink to mask the pain that you're in and to
disassociate
and push that trauma down, it will very likely become a problem. And I obviously suffered for that. I mean, I've been in 12-step fellowships for best part of, over 10 years, and the reason why I took ayahuasca was because somebody mentioned it to me about 3 years before I actually did it. And at the time I was completely I was content prior to investigation. I was like, there is no way that you can do that. It's a relapse, conducive to sobriety. Anyway, I researched it and wrote about it in my first book. And by the time I did it, I was convinced that because the 12 steps rests on people having a spiritual awakening, which many people don't, many people kind of go through the 12 steps and they just kind of don't really get the spiritual angle. They don't have any kind of big type of awakening.
It's because of the big word God that's used in it. I remember the first time I saw the word God, God or whatever, God, the person who was counselling me, he said, look, I know there's this word, God, but it doesn't mean to be. And I went, yeah, whatever.
I mean, I don't get why they didn't just use the words higher power, because everybody can get along with those words. But the word God, I was exactly the same. The word God, it's just got so many connotations.
It's very loaded. It's a very loaded word. Definitely.
But I was convinced, and still am, that if somebody is struggling to have a spiritual experience, if they did ayahuasca first, the spiritual experience that you have under the influence of that medicine is so massive.
Yes.
That then, if you then did the 12 steps, you would
you'd read it in a completely different way, wouldn't you?
You would, completely. And do you know what's really weird and really, because obviously I've done loads of research over the years for these books. It turns out that Bill Wilson, who was obviously the co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, he was on belladonna in the hospital before he had his spiritual experience, and belladonna's a psychedelic.
I didn't know that. Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then many years after, 20 years after the movement was formed, he then started doing trials with LSD. And the book that he wrote, the 12 and 12, the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions, which is, for me, even more in depth than the big book, and it goes into the emotional side of it. He wrote that after he started using LSD.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and I don't use this forum to say, right, kids, go out and use LSD and go out and take the mushrooms.
We're not saying that.
No. What we're saying is, if you are open to the spiritual path and you want to change your life and change you, because the way I look at it is, change is the only true constant. If you're not willing to change, you get stuck in this kind of retrogressive groove, and you don't develop. You never, you as a person, obviously, from when I knew you then to who I see and speak to in front of me now, there's a massive difference.
Absolutely. I feel the same about you as well. I think we both have found who we really are. What was I going to say?
I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I always remember I have had a really weird, two things that used to niggle me. I used to have words, I'd read a word and then it would be said on the TV for a long time, and that I obviously know that that's now synchronicity.
Yeah.
But but I wouldn't go any further and go, oh well, that's weird. And also with death, I used to think, oh, people go to heaven. I never thought, what's heaven? I never just went, oh, it's just heaven, isn't it? Like that would be the end of that in my thought process. And the other one was, I remember thinking, after I got married, I remember thinking, so that's it then, that's completed life, like there's nothing else now, isn't it? I remember thinking, surely this isn't it. I think I've been sold a dud life here. Like, this isn't it, is it? Surely not. Like, it didn't feel like it is. Like, being alive is supposed to be quite a big thing. Like, it's like 1 in 3 billion trillion chance of being alive. Like, this can't be everything. And then from that comes the abuse of drugs. From that comes the addiction to shopping, sex, chocolate, whatever is your thing. I honestly think that kids these days, I mean, in the 80s, there was a lot of child abuse, but I was abused as a child by someone who was a regular in the pub. And these kind of things had so much more, they happened a lot more in our childhood and just before our childhood as well. Because kids were never listened to, there was much more disconnection. I don't think that kids these days feel so disconnected. They probably will, and they will have their own things to have to push back on. But I honestly feel that parents are a lot more able to speak to their kids. And the gap between, if you look at the gap between the generational gap between great grandparents and the grandparents, and then grandparents to our parents, that was big. That was big. Our most of us have got parents that we probably didn't tell about drug use and stuff, so we're not really being our true selves. But it was slightly less than it is towards our grandparents. The generational gap gets smaller and smaller each generation. So now when you've got our age parents to kids growing up now, the gap's even smaller. So we're able to empathize and, understand them a lot more. And because of that, they don't feel that they're not heard and they're not listened to. So they won't go out and need to take drugs. Have you ever been around kids now around 18? They're healthy.
Yeah. They like to go
really
for coffee
healthy
and chat, don't they?
Yeah, there's I think it's Mickey Flanagan makes a joke of it where he says, like, you've got the older, like 50-year-old parents who go, do you want a cheeky line upstairs, like away from the kids, like, and then the kids are the ones who have been really sensible. But I honestly think that it's really massively getting phased out now. I mean, they will have their challenges, but connection and communication with children, I honestly don't see my kids needing to abuse drugs at all. So maybe Fortnite, but not drugs.
yeah. Nah, I listen to my partner talking to the kids, and it just fills me with awe. Like, she's got that, she's just such an amazing mum, and she speaks to the kids in an emotionally intelligent way, you know, like. And obviously, like, I've learned that myself as well. I can speak to them that way, and we will speak to our daughter that way. And I 100% agree with what you've just said. I think that this generation of children will grow up to not need to abuse drugs to make themselves feel better, essentially.
It won't get to that point, they will be listened to. There is a lot more that they can do. There's more people they can talk to. We have the internet now. Like I said, even with all of that they will have their ups and downs, and thank God they'll have their ups and downs, because they need to find out what they are. They need to have challenges in order to grow. But yeah, I think the particular one of drug abuse won't be such a big thing anymore, and I'm so thankful for that, because there's a lot of weird stuff out there now. I heard recently, I'm so out of touch with stuff, something called spice.
Yeah, that's huge issue. Yeah. Well, I work in that field. Like, I work in the drug and alcohol field, and the spice problem, or mamba, whichever area you're in, it's a huge issue. And ultimately what that boils down to is like, well, I used to work in prisons, and what we used to say to the inmates there was, would you smoke rat poison? And they'd be like, no. And we'd say to them, well, this stuff that you're smoking, it could be rat poison because it comes from China or Russia or whatever. It's not regulated. We don't even know what's in it. You don't know whether it's going to be an up or a down or a psychedelic. And it's just a horrendous epidemic now that's on the streets. And especially, like, I work with the homeless community, so the homeless community, that's their drug of choice now, over and above heroin and crack, and it's just a massive issue. So but the people that use that drug and get addicted to it are quite simply the ones that have suffered the most trauma, and all they want to do is they want to switch off.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't have any problem. Whenever me and the kids see anyone homeless in the street, I'll be the first one to get one of them to go over to them and give them a tenner. And one of the girls once said, but mummy, daddy said that sometimes they might use that money for drugs. And I'm like, and me and Guy both said at the same time, that's okay. Like, they're homeless, that's all right. If that's what they want to do to make it okay for them for this day, then that's not a problem. And
you know, another thing to add to that as well, I heard a really nice thing about that, is that tenner might take them to their rock bottom, and their rock bottom might get them into recovery. So, who are we to judge? And
exactly.
Who are we to say what somebody's journey is?
Exactly, darling. Exactly. It didn't do me any harm in the end, but the harm that it did do was had its equal opposite, and it made me who I am today. So I am thankful for that.
Beautiful. Well, that's a lovely way to end it. Thanks for making my 40th birthday an absolute pleasure. It's been
Yay! You're 40, aren't you?
40, naughty 40.
Oh my God!
Yeah. Cool. No, that was awesome. Thanks very much.
Happy birthday, darling.
Cheers, mate.
You old fart.
Am I overtaking you, or are you not 40 yet?
I'm 38 now. I'm clinging on to 30s. Yeah, I'll be 40 in 2 years. July the 2nd.
I'll get you back in 2 years then.
Yeah, I bet you will.
Right, cool. I'm going to let you go.
Cheers, babes. Make sure you send me that book as well.
I will do. Take care.
See you soon, babes.
Bye. Thanks very much for listening, and if you've been affected by any of the subjects discussed in the podcast, check out the links underneath the podcast description for a range of mutual aid organisations, and also don't forget to check out www.lifeinrecovery.co.uk for all my books and social media links. And if you'd like to support the podcast financially, visit www.patreon.com/lifeinrecovery. And also, just a last word about my sponsors, Dennis Berry Life Coaching. So visit www.dennisberry.com for a free consultation, and don't forget to use the code words Life in Recovery for 10% off your next 3 sessions. And also, if you visit sugaraddiction.com/Life in Recovery, you can download a free copy of Mike's book all about sugar addiction, and if you're really serious, check out his 30-day sugar freedom challenge whilst you're there. Peace and love, and goodbye for now.